Brought to you by Cap Logistics. I am Pete Mento, and with me, as always, is the Budweiser to my pepperoni pizza, the milk to my Oreos, just the kiss goodnight to my first Tinder date, Mr. Don Draper. Sorry, Doug Draper. I can't help it, man. I've been wanting to make that joke for 3 episodes now, and I'm finally going to do it. I have all these questions like, what's it like being the most desirable bachelor in Manhattan? When did you make the transition from being an ad man to being a freight man? What did you do with all those suits? I mean, it's blinding sometimes. How many times do you have to deal with that joke?
Not, in the moment when the show was on, quite a bit, but not so much anymore, unless it's old farts like yourself that keep bringing it up.
I think we're gonna go to the next time I'm in Colorado. You and I are gonna go to a vintage store because you have a very good build for suits. We're gonna go to a vintage store and we're gonna buy you some very nice old I don't know, like Mac suits, or we'll get you some old Hugo Boss suits, and we're gonna we'll get you hats like Don Draper used to wear, and we're gonna head out drinking Manhattans and making poor decisions that night. I think that's a great idea. We're gonna have Mad Men night, and we're gonna take the bus full of 14-year-olds that produce this thing with us, and I think we're gonna make it big. So right. I'm super excited for our show today. I'm really excited for our topics and a little surprise we have at the end of this. And with that, Doug, take it away, buddy.
All right. Well, the first topic I have kind of falls in line with a few of the ones I've done in past shows, and it's all related to the holiday season. And all I can say, Pete, is spend, spend, spend. And what I mean by that is that this holiday season is going to be epic in the sense that there's going to be more money spent on goods and services and food than at any other time in any holiday season in the past. Now, it might seem counterintuitive with the pandemic, challenging with people that are transitioning or potentially out of work, but it's going to happen. And it's going to happen for a couple of reasons, Pete. And they're all emotionally related, right? People purchase and act on emotion. And the first one is all going to be related to panic, right? I think I made mention of this about panic buying. It was there whenever the pandemic started. And I think it's really going to impact the food distribution network, and people are going to kind of freak out, to be honest with you. So here's a story that I had, right? So I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he said his wife was into birds, which I'm not into birds, but it's make a good point for the story here. And his bird likes pumpkin, right, that you buy from a can. So he was trying to go buy some pumpkin food for his bird, and there wasn't any on the shelf. So he had to bend down on the ground and look on the bottom shelf way in the back, and the only thing that was available was 4 cans of generic pumpkin. And I said, let me guess, you bought all 4 of them? He said, hell yeah, I bought all 4 of them. I said, if there wasn't a pandemic and that shelf wasn't bare, how many of them would you have bought? I said, I would have bought 1. That's it. I just need 1, but I bought 4. So my point is, as things progress, people are going to buy and they're going to be in panic. So the other emotion that's going to drive this is guilt, right? So I mean guilt because people are not going to be together, right? You're not going to be able to spend time face to face with your grandkids, your siblings, your parents. And so there's going to be a sense of guilt. And what that means is, well, if I can't be there with them, I'm going to buy something for them. So I'm going to buy a toy or another, a techie type of device. And so there's going to be a lot of guilt purchases. Most of those will come via e-commerce, obviously. So there you go, Pete. It's going to be the most prolific holiday season ever on record.
What I think is great, Doug, is that you gave me all this information before the show's going to air, so I can get online right now and just buy retail. Although, today is the 9th of November while we're recording this, and I don't care if that just made everybody back in the control room mad that I said the date. And the stock market's already going crazy. So, the things you're talking about, the first one about the pumpkin, I do that, man. I swear to God, I do that. I go to the grocery store and I see that there's only like one bottle of the cold brew left, and I don't even need it, and I buy it. Or when I go to buy taco seasoning, every Sunday is generally taco night, right? And there's two left. I only need one. I buy two because heaven forbid I do not have taco seasoning for taco night. And then the guilt thing, man, I don't know. I'm a divorced dad. When my daughter was with me on Christmas, I used to try very hard to replace my geographical location with a almost sacrilegious amount of gifts, dude. And it couldn't be. I hate giving you so much credit. I really do. I hate giving you so much credit for being spot on today because I generally want to dislike and hate what you bring to the conversation.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to give it to you today. And what's even worse is I hadn't thought very much about anything positive coming out of this because of all the unemployed people. But you're making too much sense for my tiny little brain. Wow. One question though. How do you think this is going to affect the broader supply chain?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty challenging, to be frank with you. There's just going to be a lot of stuff that's going to flow down on the consumer level. So if you think of almost like the tip of the spear, right, or a funnel, there's going to be a lot of maybe a funnel's a better analogy. There's going to be so much stuff that's going to be dumped into the funnel, but there's only a small amount that can come out at a time. And I think that's part of why the retail industry is starting to hype the holiday season so early. They realize that what they could do in a couple of days or a week is not fundamentally possible with the amount of volume that's going to be produced through the network in the next 45 days. So to be honest with you, it's going to be kind of a mess, at least on the final mile. And I'll just have to go back to a comment I made earlier about BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. There's going to be a lot of people coming to pick up their last minute gifts the week of Christmas.
I am patiently waiting for anyone else to say BOPIS to me. It reminds me of the movie Mean Girls, when I think it's Mean Girls, when they're trying to make, this one girl's trying to make the word fetch part of the normal vernacular. It's not going to happen, Doug. Stop trying to make BOPIS. Someone's going to do it now.
All right.
My LinkedIn is going to be flooded with BOPIS.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, hey, thanks for listening to me on my thoughts. I know that you have a topic you want to bring to the table, so bring it on. What you got?
Yeah, I'm going to get to Brexit in a moment, but we do have to just very briefly mention that we do have a president-elect in Biden, and there's a lot of conversation about what he's going to do about trade. We'll get to that in a future episode. We don't really have time to get too deep into it. But the one thing I do want to reinforce to people is I don't see any major changes happening with regards to tariffs, the 301s, the 232s. Not at first, at least. Maybe in a little while, but not at first. And the second thing I really want to talk about today is Brexit. You know, we're all starting to come to grips with a lot of the pain and suffering that's associated with our supply chains, whether that's the frustrations that come from COVID, a lot of the things that were going on with the Chinese trade wars and such. But Brexit seems to have been in the back of our minds. I don't feel like as professionals we were paying enough attention to it, when really it is a major global concern that only a few years ago was all anyone was talking about. And I think it's about time that we're taking a breather now, that we realize that this is an impending global economic and logistical event that people need to be prepared for. And with that being said, if you're not putting the time in now, if you're not actually actively working to make this better, you're going to find yourself in a whole lot of trouble once Brexit does come to a decision. And for the people who are waiting until we have a decision on Brexit, it's not going to be a whole lot of warning. It's going to fall one way or the other. I think you need to have a plan A and a plan B, and be ready for it whichever way it drops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, especially with that plan B. Right? It's easy to say, well, we don't have to do anything until Brexit does something. And it's been a waiting game for both parties. And now the levee has broken, so to speak, with some stability in the election. And I think you're spot on. If you're just waiting, if you're an American business, looking to do some sort of investment or sending some more products overseas, and you're waiting, it's going to pass you by real fast, and you're going to be on the outside looking in or trying to chase that train as it's rumbling down the tracks for sure.
Yeah, I agree. One more thing to keep in mind when you put it that way, that train rumbling down the tracks. And that train's been rumbling down the tracks for a long time. And you and I both have all kinds of stories of people who have lost jobs, lost businesses, lost clients over not having the proper response to COVID, over not having the proper response to hurricanes, to the Chinese tariffs. This is one that's been in your face for a long time. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of not a whole lot of, what's the word I'm looking for here, not a sympathy for people who haven't really put their time and effort into making it better.
Yeah, and well, speaking of Brexit, Pete, we have a guest with us today. It's Ian Richardson. He's coming to us just outside of London, and Ian brings a world of experience with freight forwarding in a couple different entities with Fritz Corporation, which is now UPS Supply Chain Solutions. Spent a little bit of time at Seco. Most of his time was spent over in China, and he's also started a company called Supply Chain Consulting Partnership. So all of that simply says this guy knows what he's talking about. And obviously he's there and we're here in America. So we'd like to bring in Ian to our show and get some information and have him pontificate, if you will, about Brexit. So Ian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, guys, and lovely warm welcome. Yes, sitting here in London, we're having this crazy Indian summer. I think the weather's been blown in from Barbados or somewhere. We've got 18 degrees for the next couple of weeks. So, rather than feeling the cool chill of COVID, Brexit, and every other problem that's been coming our way, at least we can't complain about the weather, which is what we Brits usually do. So I'm looking forward to telling you whatever I can about Brexit from our perspective. Certainly from my perspective, we mentioned about London. Part of my upbringing was at the London docks, the Port of Tilbury. We now have a new London dock just along the road from there called the London Gateway, which is a huge $4 billion enterprise just 20 minutes from where I'm living for a new container port. And I worked in the port of Felixstowe and Southampton before moving to Hong Kong, which at the time was the biggest container port in the world. So I do have quite some perspectives. I enjoy working with my colleagues over there in the USA. Part of my homecoming 3 years ago to London has been interesting for me, working in a new trade lane. We called them trade lanes when we were at UPS and Fritz. And that is working on that transatlantic trade and all the things working in the future with UK. You just mentioned when we were talking off air about events of this week and what's going to happen in the new year with potential trade deals or not trade deals. And all of this is linked in with Brexit. So if you want to frame any questions for me, I'll pontificate to my heart's content, or you can cut me off if you feel you have something different that you'd like me to say.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I appreciate that. So I would pretty much say you've heard Pete and I, speak about our thoughts and what's going to transpire, but you're there, right? You can give us the real perspective of things. So maybe just say, what's the one or two key things you think is going to be the biggest struggle to find that true trade agreement now that we've had the election settle down a little bit?
I wish I had a crystal ball. Let me try and give some perspective on that. The Brexit story here, ran on and on for best part of 3 years in England, and it was driving everybody to weariness. There was not another discussion in any room and in any news channel for 3 years, and it seems incredible to think that then pushed to the sidelines since COVID came along, probably for us January, February, and we were locked down for the first time on the 23rd of March. So the Brexit story is only just becoming back to the front lines. In fact, our nightly television, which is something I've now had to get used to doing, we didn't do that in Hong Kong. Watching nightly TV, we're seeing government-sponsored advertisements. Very well done, super professional, telling industry to be ready for Brexit. Looking at it as a professional, I'm taking on board, these comments telling the industry to be ready, everybody in the supply chain, which pleases me even more because obviously that's my industry. And the big issues, if I could pick them up, are literally state of readiness and or lack of, I should say, because there's no clarity. I guess the whole process has been politicized. There's been a lot of finger pointing. Remember, it's a very close run election, or a discussion about this. It was just a 2 percentage points. And there was a lot of repercussions around that. And those people that lost didn't like to lose and then spent the next couple of years trying to overturn it. So this means that we've come almost up against the 11th hour of the 11th hour. And we are not clear still today as to what Brexit will look like. There are the idea that we will end up with a no-deal Brexit, which, if you look on the bright side, and I tend to be one of those optimistic people, that we are, the 5th biggest economy in the world. That must be said, part of Europe or not part of Europe, most of the world wants to deal with this 5th largest economy. So if we do go for a hard Brexit, we are able to carve out trade deals with other countries. And I do believe I'm speaking for a wider group, not just myself, that we are hopeful of a particularly good trade deal with our cousins over there in the USA. Such a huge economy. I think we have got that special relationship that's mentioned very many times. So the biggest point to your question is uncertainty is still the key. Here we are right on top of the decision time, or will there be a trade deal? Now that the election seems to have been finalised in America, and the COVID news is slipping down just a little bit while the press channels are talking about Brexit. The situation now is coming down to, can we make a deal with Europe? And it's hanging in the balance. And as I'm sitting here, nobody knows. Part of my work has been, just before lockdown, certainly this year, is advising a number of my retail clients. Mostly retail has been my background through my Fritz and UPS supply chain days, is trying to advise clients to go after an accreditation. Over here we call it AEO, which is Approved Economic Operator Accreditation. It is very much aligned with CTPAT, as you'll be very familiar with in USA. So the whole point, making you a trusted trader, being able to prove that you have all of your checks and balances in place, that you are financially, economically sound, and that your supply chain is robust, and that you do the proper checks and balances with your suppliers so that there's no money laundering and all the other worries that our HMRC, our HM Customs and Excise, are charged with looking after. So these are the main challenges. We have utter uncertainty. We're poised on an absolute knife edge, waiting for deal or no deal, and business is trying its best to prepare for it. But to be honest with you, everybody was sidelined with the COVID situation, meaning that businesses did not have boardrooms working as normal. You didn't have offices working as normal. Most of my clients and most of the shipping lines that I tend to deal with are all working from home still, and will be until at least January. So trying to get anybody to make decisions is nigh on impossible. So you can probably hear it in my voice. I'm trying to give some clarity, but there is not much clarity to give. We're just trying to work on how we're going to move nimbly when we do know, but I don't think we're going to know until the last minute.
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in here real quick, Doug. So
Yeah.
most of the people who watch and listen to the show are in the U.S. If you could give American companies who might not necessarily operate in the U.K. a quick piece of advice, what sort of advice would you give them on preparing for the unknown and getting themselves in a position to maybe be a little more successful.
I think the best advice I could give has something I've been doing, I suppose, unwittingly for decades, is having good, strong partners over here in Europe. If you don't know your battleground, if you don't have good allies, you will find yourself in a weaker position. So probably I've been very fortunate in the industry I chose that we tend to be stronger with having people on the ground in each location. Same for me. Like I was always the go-to person for my American and British and European colleagues when I was in Hong Kong and Shanghai. Likewise, that's what I'm doing here for my colleagues in the USA. People like yourself are reaching out to me. How can I work? How can I be ready? I think the best advice I would give there, Pete, would be have people on the ground. Forge alliances, forge relationships, because otherwise you're going to be working very much in the dark. And just like we're all doing here tonight or for me tonight on the call, is sharing information with knowledgeable people, answering questions at each end of the transaction. For example, your trade over there in the US far more than I could ever know. Likewise, I should know the trade here in the UK. I've been at it since 1979. So partnerships, alliances, call them agencies, network, that seems to me to be the key to work our way through this uncertainty.
Hey, Ian, question for you, and I alluded this to earlier in our conversation. Are you concerned that the UK is going to lose some relevancy as far as power and getting products and things into Europe? And kind of what I was saying about that was, if I'm a small business and I'm trying to sell my goods into Europe, the UK was a natural gateway back, before Brexit, right? Speak the same language. There's a comfort level. There's a great financial support system there. So I'm going to go through the UK to springboard into the rest of the EU. Now that there's the separation, is there any concern at the country level, or even your personal opinion, about, I'm just going to bypass UK and I'm going to go to Paris or Germany or something to go get my money so I can enter the market in the UK? What do you think about that?
A very good question, and quite I guess quite a sensitive question. I guess from my point of view, and it's best I can speak for myself. Although obviously in these COVID-related days, I have an awful lot more time to read, research more than I normally would, because normally I'd be spending many hours in the car, on the train, face-to-face meetings, which we just can't do at the moment. So spent a lot more time reading up on these topics during this week, and just ensuring you're taking in news feeds from everywhere and opinions. I actually, again, I told you I'm a very glass half full kind of guy. I actually believe UK, Britain will come through this stronger. This point about relevancy, again, I mentioned that quote about UK being, fifth largest economy. I think its relevance will continue. I don't think we'll become any less relevant after separating from Europe. I think we'll become a very strong partner trading with Europe. If you think about the amount of things we trade together, I don't think that's going to change. Everybody's going to still want their BMWs and Mercedes, and the Germans, the French are going to want everything that we produce. I think it's going to be a very vibrant trade. I think the financial market is very interesting. I'm not the financial spectator, but certainly there was some talk over the last couple of years that potentially the London financial markets might think about moving from London to, let's say, Frankfurt or Paris. Even Dublin was mentioned. There doesn't seem to be quite so much of that discussion that I'm hearing these days. I think the other point about the relevancy of UK as a landing point, let's say for physical goods for Europe, to be honest with you, we had that great big stretch of water between us and the rest of the continent, about 22 miles. And we have a very expensive train service that carries a lot of freight and a lot of people between ourselves and Europe, which is quite expensive. So it tends to be that if you're physically landing goods in Europe or exporting from, you will send your goods directly to that country anyway. So if you're shipping to Germany, you'll ship to Hamburg or Bremen or even Rotterdam. Some parts of Germany is closer to Rotterdam. And if you're shipping into the UK, you'll use our main gateway ports anyway. So yes, while we flow goods backwards and forwards, an enormous amount of flow of goods across the channel, then that will continue. But if you're shipping from America, you will come directly to the UK or directly to Germany or directly to France. I don't think that will change.
Yeah, this is the time where Doug looks at me and says, "You're going to ask more questions." And I think that we've kept from tea time long enough. But I think it's very lucky, very fortunate for our viewers and for our listeners that we were able to have you on with us today, Ian.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate it.
And I have one more question for you, right? So it's been a crazy week here in the United States, and it looks like we finally have a president-elect, Joe Biden. Is that a sigh of relief, a bit of concern? What are your thoughts now that we have some sort of direction over here? And I know Boris Johnson was looking for that to calm down before he made some decisions. What do you think? Good, bad, indifferent?
Whoa, that's a tricky one. I'm a shipping guy, No, I think, again, speaking personally, it's a great relief. It's a good thing. I think the world was holding its breath. It was on tenterhooks, waiting for this decision to drop one way or the other. Like in most things, we seem to know now with some clarity where we're going. There's been a lot of discussion over here as to how Mr. Johnson is going to be working with Mr. Biden. And there's quite a lot of commentary along the lines of, well, Mr. Biden's such a long-term veteran of the political world, and he's known every other prime minister except Boris Johnson, and they're not necessarily politically aligned. But there's a lot of talk that there is, again, you cannot get away from this, and I believe in it. I strongly believe in it. We have a massive special relationship between the UK and the USA. I feel positive that will work. I am greatly relieved, as I'm sure most of my customers and my suppliers will be, that we now have some clarity going forward. We hope, with fingers strongly crossed, that the relationship between Mr. Johnson and his team and Mr. Biden and his team will be that special relationship continuing, because I think that will be good business for both countries. If it's good business for both countries, it's good business for people like us in our industry. So yeah, I'm really upbeat.
Good. Ian, you got to keep those fingers crossed for me, man, because I put money down. I've been begging to be the ambassador to the UK. So keep those fingers crossed, man, because I'm hoping I get the phone call any moment from DC that I'm His Excellency Pete Mento, ambassador to the United Kingdom. I'll do a bang up job. Just send me in there with Boris and Biden. I'll crack their heads together, get this thing done in 20 minutes, I swear.
Get them working. I hear the gossip of today is that we might see Mr. Obama over here as the ambassador to London. That would be interesting. Ambassador to the UK, I should say. That would be quite interesting. So Pete, you got some competition there.
He doesn't drink enough beer. He doesn't like rugby. I've never seen the man eat the kind of fat, salt, and sugar-based foods that people in England adore so much. I just don't think he's right for you. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that I am the perfect person.
Nice. Good. Well, hey, Ian, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We're just kind of starting now that things have settled down here in the U.S. with the presidential situation. So I know for a fact we're going to have you back on when things start rocking and rolling. There will be a lot of momentum moving forward, and you will be back on the show. We love having you. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invite. It's great to be with you guys. It makes me stop and think. It's lovely to have a different perspective, and I learn a lot from you as well. So thank you again.
Be safe, Ian.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was some good feedback on all of our topics and good perspective from Brexit on both sides of the pond. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this week on Global Trade This Week. Of course, it's brought to you by Cap Logistics. We'll be back next week where we'll be forward thinking about what the next step is and what's transpiring in our world of global trade. Pete, as always, thanks. Good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you too, Doug.